The Titanic was the biggest and most luxurious ship of its time, and no expense was spared during its construction, except of course for the lifeboats. If it were built today, the Titanic would cost $190 million. Let's travel back to 1912 and take a virtual tour of the ill-fated passenger liner. We'll show you the living quarters of some of the ship's wealthiest passengers, including multimillionaire Jacob Astor IV. You'll get to see what the first-class dining saloon was like, and we'll show you the elegant reception room where Jack Dawson hung out. Just kidding. We'll show you the elegant reception room and magnificent grand staircase. The gangway is lowering, so let's hop on board. Don't worry about icebergs. Just sit back and enjoy the incredible voyage. First, let's head over to the first-class reception room on the D-deck. This is where the ship's wealthiest passengers gather to discuss the news of the day. The first thing you'll notice about this stunning room is the glorious grand staircase. The light oak coloring of the staircase made it stand out against the white walls of the reception room, and at the base of the staircase on the middle railing sat an ornate cherub-esque candelabra. The reception room was 4,951 square feet, and the grand staircase descended 7 levels from the boat deck all the way down to the E-deck. The Titanic actually had a second smaller grand staircase located at the aft of the ship. Next, let's take a look at the first-class stateroom. Only the richest people on board the Titanic got to stay in first-class cabins. First-class staterooms were decorated in various periodic styles, including Louis XVI, Empire Adam, Italian Renaissance, Louis XV, Regency, Queen Anne, Modern Dutch, and Old Dutch. To say that the first-class staterooms were opulent would be an understatement. A typical first-class stateroom included a luxurious dressing table, horsehair sofa, elegant wardrobe, and a marble-topped washstand with basin. The cost of a berth in a first-class cabin was $150. That's about $3,500 adjusted for inflation. The $150 admission was chump change for the Titanic's richest passenger, Jacob Astor IV. The business magnate perished when the Titanic sank, and he left the majority of his $150 million fortune to his son, Vincent. That fortune would be worth about $3.5 billion today. Another famous first-class passenger was Ben Guggenheim, who was worth about $4 million. As spectacular as the staterooms were, there were actually cabins that were even more luxurious. The Titanic had 4 parlor suites, 2 of which connected to a private promenade deck. Each parlor suite consisted of 2 spacious bedrooms, a lavatory, and a grand sitting room. The sitting rooms were incredibly lavish and large enough for guests to host small parties. Guests could relax and sit by the faux fireplace or play a game of auction bridge on the large card table. Guests could even use the sitting room's desk to write a letter and then have it sent to the Titanic's post office. The cost to stay in a parlor suite was $4,350 in 1912. That's more than $100,000 adjusted for inflation. Yachtswoman, big game hunter, and patron of the arch Charlotte Drake Cardeza stayed in a parlor suite during the Titanic's maiden voyage. She had $5,500 in cash on board. That's about $132,000 adjusted for inflation. The money didn't survive the sinking of the Titanic, but Cardeza did. Good job, Cardeza! Next, let's see what the first-class dining saloon looked like. The walls were painted white and decorated with elaborate carved wooden boiseries. The floors were covered in blue linoleum tiles, which featured an elaborate red and yellow pattern. To add ambience, the dining saloon's portholes were covered by leaded glass windows. This gave the impression that patrons were dining on shore rather than at sea. The last meal served on the ship was a lavish affair. Patrons were treated to appetizers of oysters. The second course was consommé Olga, a delicious broth soup garnished with scallops. For the third course, guests dined on poached salmon. For the main course, guests had a choice of filet mignon or chicken lyonnaise. Dessert was a scrumptious Waldorf pudding. Little did the passengers know that it would be their last meal. A first-class menu from the Titanic was sold at auction in 2018 for $131,097. Next, let's take a look at one of the Titanic's most luxurious amenities, the Turkish Baths. Only first-class passengers could access the Turkish Baths, which were located in the F-deck directly behind the first-class elevator and grand staircase. The walls of the baths were lavishly decorated with Middle Eastern-style blue-green tiles. The Turkish Baths' central cooling room was adorned with bronze lamps and decorated in a mix of Moorish and Arabic styles. Against one wall sat a magnificent marble drinking fountain, and the ceiling was embellished with gilded beams and hanging lanterns. Women were allowed to use the Turkish baths in the morning, while male passengers used the Turkish baths in the evening. Finally, let's take a look at the Titanic's Parisian-style cafe. Café Parisien was located at the aft of the Titanic directly above the library and turbine engine. Both first-class and second-class passengers, second class can do it, could dine and socialize in the cafe, and patrons were treated to stunning views of the open ocean. The cafe's trellises were lined with live English ivy, and a luxurious green carpet ran the length of the cafe. Guests could dine on a wide variety of foods at Café Parisien. Some guests enjoyed tea and sweets like chartreuse jelly and chocolate and vanilla eclairs, delicious. Other guests partook in a more fulfilling fare like oysters, roast duck, foie gras, salmon, and beef sirloin. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that the Titanic movie cost more to make than the ship itself? James Cameron's Titanic had a budget of $200 million, while the Titanic ship cost $7.5 million to build, which is about $190 million adjusted for inflation. That's it, folks. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to this channel for more great videos.